All right, so there's been a couple people that have had issues pulling the stock crank set off. So I wanted to do this quick video just because it's really hard to explain this if you've never done it before. So picture this being the hub, and sticking out of the rear hub in the bottom bracket, is what's called a square taper shaft, which means it's fatter on the end and it gets a little less tapered as you go up. That allows you to stuff things down onto it and get a good grip. And then this isn't to scale, but there's a shaft that comes out. On that shaft, we put the crankset. So, this is just part of it, but the pedal or the crankset, depending on which side you're on, would stick out from this. So this would be the center of the crank on the right side, or it would be the pedal on the left side. And what it does is it stuffs itself down onto this shaft, that square taper, and stays on. So what you need, and there's probably some more nuances in there without me going to take one apart. But this is, if I could do this. So this is a crank puller. So if you think about the concept of this piece right here, this nub at the end, ta-da, inserts in and sits on the tip of this shaft. Okay? And this thread here threads into here. Now, I don't think that's the issue that people are having, but that threads in here. So what you end up with is this puller gripping the crank arm, either side, through those threads, but this little nub here pushing down on the shaft in the center. And the whole idea is, as you turn the end of this, and it's going to be hard for me to do with one hand, but as you turn this, and I'll show you. So I'm going to actually turn this piece backwards, but it's basically be like screwing this part in. But if you start with it all the way back and you get that screwed in, and then you start turning it, what you see is that nub goes further and further out. And if you can picture it, that end of that nub is pushed up against this shaft, and these teeth, these threads, have a hold of the crank arm. So as you turn that in, and again, I'm just approximating turning this clockwise, you can see how, relatively speaking, these threads and the crank arm pull away from the bike, right? So picture that being just up against that, and that's pulling it straight off in a way, forcibly, from being stuck onto here. Now, a lot of old bikes will have a problem with corrosion and aluminum versus metal and all those things. But when I did this with my Fold, it pulled right off. There was really no significant effort turning this. And again, you've got to screw this piece, these threads, all the way into the crank arm. And by the way, this piece needs to be all the way out, because if it's not all the way out, you're not going to get all the way into the crank arm. So even though the instructions might say otherwise, this has to be all the way out. We'll pull out as far as you can go reasonably. So when you screw it into those threads, this is pushing up against that. So then as you turn this piece clockwise, this pulls over.